Okay, ching ching.
Ching ching.
And we're going to have a glass of wine before we start working.
Yay.
Thank you. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so let's get started. We're going to begin with just a photograph that I've just found on the internet. It's a vintage portrait. I just went on Google and searched vintage portrait. We're going to use a transfer method today. So we're going to turn over the image, and I'm just going to cover the back of my image in pencil. I'm using a 2B pencil because it's nice and light and it's not going to show through too much when I begin painting. Holding the pencil slightly towards the end so that you get nice thick strokes as you go. And don't worry if you've got little gaps, it doesn't really matter because we're only after a rough sketch. Some people might want to just sketch the portrait straight up or not even sketch, that's fine. This is just a method that I prefer to use because it's quick and it's easy and I can jump straight into the fun stuff. So what I'm going to do now is just lightly press over the top of all of the main features and some of the outlines, but I'm not going to transfer everything. So I like to begin with the eyes, and I'm just looking at any areas of light and dark. So I'm not trying to imagine where the edge of the eye is, rather I'm looking at where the dark sections are. So you can see I haven't tried to draw in the edge of the pupil there, or sorry, the iris. I've just gone around where I can see that there is a black shadow. And I'm only looking for the main areas. I don't need to do everything because it's going to be quite a loose painting. It's not going to be super detailed. I'm just looking for some highlights here, following the edge of the face. Again, not looking for the actual shape of the chin, just looking for the highlights and shadows. Nearly there. Alright, so we're going to begin painting. So the main thing when painting with wine is that you need to work in layers. So you need to start by putting down a bit of a thin, lighter layer, and then gradually as you add to it, it'll get darker. So don't be too worried if it doesn't come out super dark straight away like it might when you're using something like watercolors. And we can apply it quite quickly. We might go a little bit slower when we're just working around any detailed areas like the eyes or the lips. But when we're doing the other shadows, we want to kind of just whack it down because it's only our first layer. We are going to keep adding to it. So I'm just looking for any darker areas, and I'm just avoiding putting any wine where there might be a lighter area. And everything else I'm just going to basically fill in. So you can see I'm getting a basic kind of idea of what the face looks like. And anywhere that I just want to increase that darkness, I'll just go back in later and add a little bit more wine, and I'll just keep building it up until I'm happy. So I am looking at my reference image quite a bit at the moment because I'm just making sure that I place these shadows in the correct place. Because the main thing when you're doing a portrait is to get the features right. After that, you can be as loose as you want with the rest of the face. The rest of the face can be quite abstract even. It doesn't have to be realistic, as long as you've got some detail in the eyes, maybe the lips, not even the nose, then you'll have a reasonably good looking portrait. I might actually just fill that all in. Oop. And it's quite dark here, so we're just going to block that in. And as I said, we are going to go over the top and build up the colour a bit more later. And we'll just see what happens. I'm going to take a larger brush now and block in some of the darker areas. You can see I'm dipping my brush a lot in order to get as much colour on the page as I can, and using some textural mark making as well to create the effect of hair. Most of this in this image is quite black. Don't worry if you get little spots like this, because sometimes they can look quite nice and add to your picture. I'm not actually going to end up defining the edge of this hair. I want it to be quite swirly and loose. So you can play around with things like that when you're feeling ready to do so. And the key with any portrait, I think, is contrast. So once we get that contrast in there, it's going to start to really jump off the page. So as I said, this is just our first layer. And I might even take a little bit of water. See what happens. It's just about having fun as well, moving the paint around. And then in a minute we'll add a little bit more to that face. It's looking like it might be ready for some more layers soon. So I'm just using some water to drag some of that colour out now. And I'm not really worrying about trying to blend any edges or anything. Just trying to create some subtle shadows. Using the colour that's already there and just bleeding it onto the page. Okay, so we'll let that dry for a minute, and then when we're happy with that, we'll add a little bit more and we'll see what happens. If you'd like to speed up your drying process, you can use a hairdryer and just put it on a low, cool setting, and be careful not to hold it too close, as you might blow some of the wine around. Okay, so I've just finished drying it. Now I'm going to try and add another layer. I've just quickly secured it with a bit of sticky tape because the paper was starting to warp. You might want to do that at the beginning before you start painting, just so that your paper doesn't bend, which will make the wine run off the edge of it. So we're going to go back in and add some more layers now, looking for the darkest areas and focusing on those. And the best thing about painting with wine is that you can drink it as you go, and the more you drink, the better your painting will look. So not being afraid to put down lots of paint at once. And you can see as it dries, it has this lovely pinky tone, and what we might try to do a bit later is we can even add in some other things, like we could add in some food coloring to maybe give it a bit of a purple hue. We could consider adding some fine liner, working back into the image with some black areas to just define areas a little bit more. You can keep adding as much as you want. You don't have to stop just with the wine. You can continue adding, creating, experimenting. Just have fun with it. So you can see I'm focusing on the main details of the image. Adding lots of paint, letting it run a little bit, not being too careful. If you feel like you've gone a little bit far, you can use a little bit of paper towel to pull some back. Take some off and have another go. Or you can just let it flow a little bit more and see what happens. I'm just going to have a little bit of fun now, because I'm just going to let that sit for a bit, and then I'll try and create some more different tones, because I don't want it to be perfection. I'm not after a photorealist portrait today. I kind of want this face to look a little bit like it's kind of surrounded by some sort of a floral arrangement or clouds or something like that, with just a few features peeping out from underneath. So now I've added a little bit of food coloring into my wine, and I'm just going to have a little bit of a play around with just adding some extra darker tones, just to see what happens. I've not tried this before, so it might be a fail, but that's okay. We can try something else. Art isn't about getting it right first time, it's about having a go, enjoying the process, and then hopefully creating something enjoyable. Just looking for those little areas now where I can pick up some extra detail. And probably only adding these darker tones to the main features. So thinking about the eyes, the mouth, the nose. We don't want to add it all over because then we'll lose that lovely pink effect that we've achieved with the wine. Just define a bit of the edge of the face there. A bit of the chin. And the great thing about doing a painting like this is it really doesn't matter if you've got the right brushes, the right tools. You can literally just use what you've got laying around and you don't have to worry too much about how it's going to turn out because it's just about the process. It's just about having fun. So you can see I've avoided the sort of the main face area, just the features and some of the darker tones, just to add a little bit of texture. So I'm just going to dry it again and then we'll work back into it a bit more. What I might do while I'm drying is add a few extra drops here and there. So get a larger brush. And then I can actually use the hairdryer to push that paint around. Just see what sort of effects it creates. Some people don't like these, they're called cauliflowers. But what you can do is, if you want to create a bit of a floral pattern, you can even add bits of water. And what that will do is that'll suck the paint off the page. And as you're drying, you can create these cauliflowers, which kind of look like flowers. Okay, so let's keep going. Let's just keep adding layers and see how far we can push it. I'm going to add some more dark tones along here. Just try to kind of define the edge of the face a little bit. And I'm not really worrying about my directional mark making because I want it to look quite free, quite mysterious. And then what we can do is we can even create, let's add a bit of water there to wash that out a bit. I've got some slightly diluted red wine as well that I poured a little bit of water into that I can use to create more of a wash if I want any areas to be a little bit lighter. What I might do to add a little bit more of just a little bit more dimension to the painting is I'm going to try and speckle a little bit of bleach. So just household bleach that you would find around your house. I'm just going to squirt little bits and just watch what happens. Just tiny bits. Even speckle some on like this, see what happens. And then before it gets too
That's quite interesting actually, the effects that you're getting there.
just to further add to the floral effect. So I've decided to just grab a little bit of watercolor now, and I'm just gonna keep defining those edges. I've just got a little bit of black and a little bit of blue, indigo blue mixed together, and I'm using a art spectrum watercolor that I can squeeze straight from the tube, and then I can use it without adding any water to it, and then I'm actually going to go and bleed the color out afterwards, just so that I can get a nice defined edge there. Just a few strokes to suggest hair, but then we don't want them to be too defined, so we can just take a flat brush and go over the top of them. So instead of applying water ahead of time, I've applied it straight from the tube to try and get really dark tones, and then I'm going to lift some off where I don't want it to sit. Just working back into those features a little bit more. I'm really just playing around, I'm experimenting. I'm just seeing how far I can push this. A little bit more here and there. Trying my hardest not to overdo it. Let's soften that one a little bit because I do feel like it's a little bit harsh. I'm starting to look at my reference a little bit more again. And I think I'll just dry it again quickly. Okay, so we started with the wine and then we decided to add a little bit of food coloring, a little bit of bleach. Then we've worked back in with a little bit of watercolor. So then I thought, why not add a little bit of pen as well? So we're just going to keep going, and it really is just about having fun. It really is just about experimenting. It's not about coming up with some perfect finished piece. It's just about seeing how far we can push it, and then maybe being able to use these techniques and processes on other artworks in the future. So really you're just coming on a journey with me, and we're just seeing what we can do together. So I'm just going to start by looking for some shapes that I can see kind of hiding in and amongst this picture. So I'm seeing some sort of petal shapes here, some sort of a floral shape that I'm just going to try to define a little bit. And I'm just going to start by doing a little bit of mark making, and then I will go back in and try to redefine those shapes a little bit more afterwards, once I've kind of marked out where I want things to sit. So I'm looking for maybe some little floral shapes. And I'm not overthinking it, I'm just trying to, as we said, have some fun. You might want to look at some pictures on the internet of different flowers if you're not familiar with different flower shapes, or you could just go for it, it doesn't really matter. So I'm just thinking at the moment. I'm not trying to get too much happening just yet. And the beauty with flowers is they come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. There's not any sort of perfect flower shape, so you can really get away with anything when you're creating these floral shapes in your paintings. So I'm being quite rough at the moment, and I'll come back in and redefine it. So I'm making sure that when I make some of these marks that I'm not trying to control my pen too much. I'm just kind of letting it move where it wants to. I'm just looking at different shapes that I can see, picking out different areas that I might want to define. Doesn't have to be flowers, you might just decide to go around and make a bit of an edge. And then people's imaginations will create what they want out of the picture.
Thanks, Cherie. That looks fantastic. So as you can see, we've explored some wine today, and we've been looking at different types of wines. We've diluted wine, we've mixed wine with some pigments. But if we go back in history, most of the artists used pure full-bodied red wines, and back then they had really dark colours of wines that you could actually dilute. So if you find a full-bodied wine in your liquor store or at home somewhere, you might want to try and reduce it. We did experiment prior to this video boiling it up, but it changed the colour to brown, so we decided not to do that. But by all means, give wine a go. It's a lot of fun, something different to do. And if you can get a concentrated red wine, you might even be able to darken the tones. But there's no rules. You can add different materials. We've added all sorts of things, as Cherie mentioned. So I'd like to say thank you to Cherie for coming in and demonstrating portraiture on a different level.
Thank you for having me.